Have you decided to take care of your financial education? Today's video, we're going to be covering this week's topics. I hope you enjoy them. When it comes to exchange traded funds, they've been a staple in investors' portfolio for decades, including my own. I only invest in ETFs and ETFs. I do not buy individual stocks. And that, of course, gives me a big opportunity to own a variety of companies within these ETFs. And of course, looking at different categories, we're going to be breaking down the top 5 categories that they've really identified for 2025 that we're going to see a lot of different growth. Now, when you start thinking of companies individually, if you're investing in 1, 2, 10, 50 companies, you could roll it into an ETF, and the ETF is aimed at a specific sector that is really poised for growth. And when we start looking at these ones, the first one is cryptocurrency ETFs. So when we think of cryptocurrencies and of course Bitcoin, it has been all over the news. In my personal opinion, I feel like not only with, President-elect Donald Trump winning the election, but his support of the crypto market and regulation that we're going to see, Bitcoin specifically is up by 125% year to date, which was all-time highs, looking at $102,000 to $103,000 in December, which is crazy. Now, of course, with the introduction of the Bitcoin ETFs and the Ether ETFs, it is really important because if we start seeing this on a institutional scale, that is a lot larger, where if we're seeing 2, 3, even 5% of portfolios from these large investment companies that are starting to put money into those Bitcoin ETFs, they are going to have Bitcoin to essentially back and own whatever they're putting into these portfolios, which could really make a big difference. I think going into 2025 or even later, that ETFs are going to continue to roll out in the cryptocurrency space, and we're going to see a lot more institutional investors that are jumping on board with it. Now, as we see the approval of these ETFs, making it easier because now they have something to go on. When we have the Bitcoin ETF, now we have the Ethereum ETF. So a lot of people are saying, what is next? Everyday investors can now participate and they can invest in cryptocurrency. I know they don't own the coins. I know they don't have the passcodes, the passphrases, the passkeys. I know, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, when we talk about keeping an eye on something, the second one we look at is artificial intelligence ETFs. Now, of course, long-term investors are looking at these ETFs because it's very important. When you start looking at the AI industry, there's a couple different ways that you can really look at this. You could go to the hardware side of like the semiconductors, building the computers and the chips, which we have with like NVIDIA and AMD, a couple like that. You could also look at the software side where you're starting to invest in more of the AI, the developmental technology, some of the learning-based, solving complex problems in a very short amount of time. But you could also look at something like the entire sector that encompasses both. When you start looking at information technology or even the AI space, being able to not only get into the infrastructure of the actual kind of brick and mortar building, but you can also get into the software of the research and development and the AI side of it, which makes a big difference. When you start looking at some of the major tech companies that are really pursuant and driving artificial intelligence, we have Apple, we have Microsoft, we have Alphabet, we have NVIDIA. Some of these have seen a tremendous amount of growth. Even when we start thinking of the top 10 companies of the S&P 500, they are about 30 to 35% of the entire market just because of their cap. Now, the third one we look at is equity ETFs. Now, of course, this is not based on, the cryptocurrency side, not looking at the artificial intelligence, but this is looking at traditional equity ETFs, which gives you exposure to stocks of all kinds. It looks at everything, ensuring you have the diversification of a portfolio, not to mention when it comes to ETFs, there are super low fees associated with it. Diversity of stocking, or putting the diversification of stocks within equity ETFs, makes a really big difference. And of course, they have performed roughly 90% better over an extended amount of time than actively managed funds, which is the reason why, even thinking of Warren Buffett, when he starts talking about, investing in these equity funds or really these classic ETFs that track the indexes like the S&P 500 or even looking at the NASDAQ 100, makes a really big difference because you have almost instant diversification because you have so many companies within that space. Now, of course, when you look at this, I love the diversification. I love the very low expense ratio that it has, which is the reason, again, why I invest in those ETFs, and all of my portfolios are in those ETFs. Now, before we continue with the list, guys, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Give it a thumbs up. And let's get into number 4, which is our fixed income ETFs. This is a super popular category, and I see a lot of people that are kind of a blend of both of those. When we start looking at something like a fixed income, it could hold bonds, it could hold other debt securities. Bond fund ETFs are what a lot of people put money into, which include corporate treasuries, corporate bonds, mortgage-backed securities. There's a lot of different things when it comes to the fixed income ETFs. And for me, I love the dividend ETFs, which include like the HD, the VYM, some of those like the JEPI that are going to create and really have income on a regular basis, if it's on a monthly basis, if it's on a quarterly basis. And of course, like I said, with the bonds, if you are holding bond ETFs, you have to pay attention to the historical performance. So overall, we know when interest rates start coming down, it does make a big difference on the bond prices. And of course, it makes the bonds a little bit more valuable. The new bonds that are issued are at a much lower rate, but the older bonds that are out there are at a higher rate. And a lot of people are trying to lock in that higher rate. We see it with high yield savings. We see it with the certificates of deposits or CDs. And of course, if you're looking at when when your interest rates are low, it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep a lot of money into bonds. I've looked at a lot of bonds. I've really, like the BND, there's quite a few different ones. And it seems like overall, even looking at the performance of the stability of the stock market, the S&P 500, I don't understand a lot of logic why people put a lot of their portfolio into bonds. When you look at the last 10-year average, it's been about 2 to 3%. When you look at the S&P, it's yielding about 10% a year, which is kind of crazy. Over the last decade, you are seeing a ton of growth, but there's always going to be investors that are looking at those fixed income ETFs. And of course, the final one we're going to look at is gold ETFs. Investing in gold has historically been a way to hedge inflation and protect their money. And of course, it seems that the need for it and the demand for it is still holding strong and will still hold strong going into 2025. The price of gold has risen 25% to date, and economists forecast it's going to be about $3,000 an ounce, according to Bank of America. Now, global physical gold ETF, which of course is the gold bullion itself, had a 6-month streak of inflows. So again, a lot more people are buying gold ETFs, and the amount of $4.3 billion in one single month, which was October. So again, as we start seeing uncertainty in the market, a lot of people are kind of questioning what the S&P 500 is going to do going into 2025. Putting money into something like a gold ETF might make a big decision. Now, before we get into investing into any of those ETFs, there are really 2 questions that I have to pose for you, and definitely let me know down in the comments what you decide. And the first one is deciding what ETF you're going to buy, what is going to be your investment strategy, and how much do you have to invest. When we start looking at the investment side, we are talking 5+ years is the investment. Are you going to do lump sum where you put your money all together? Are you going to do dollar cost averaging? Exactly how are you going to invest and what is it going to look like for the next 5+ years? And of course, do you have a brokerage account? Let me know where you keep your brokerage account. Me personally, I have it at M1 Finance. I also do have an account with Robinhood. I have some links down below if you definitely want to join. A big question that I got is, how do I invest money? Now, this was just a general question that I've actually gotten a couple times now. When you look at having money in a financial institution, let's say it's at a bank, it's at a credit union, regardless of where it is, the younger generation, and this individual was about 19 years old, said, how do I get my money from point A, which was in a credit union, to point B, invested in stocks, invested in equity? She said, I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, seen a lot of videos on TikTok, a couple other places, but I don't understand the actual, what actually happens to get my money from point A, the financial institution, to point B, the brokerage account, to where they can invest the money. So I got her set her up with M1. Super excited because she was able to invest. And honestly, if you're new to investing, move over $100, play with it for a little bit, see and really get the feel for the technology. If you like Robinhood, if you like M1, if you like Webull, there are so many different places, regardless of what you want to invest in, that can do the investing for you. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Are you invested in the S&P 500? If you are, this is the video for you, because Goldman Sachs is saying there is a very gloomy outlook when it comes to that S&P 500 over the next 10 years, looking at an index growth of around 3%. Now, over the last 10 years, we have seen roughly 13% annualized return of the S&P 500. So it is a drastic reduction when it comes to the build. Now, Goldman Sachs overall, they think it is really due and it is going to be a dismal decade is what they're calling it because of the market concentration and that the current rank is near 100-year highs. So that can be a little bit concerning, which I want to break down. And also, I do want to share with you the alternative that they're looking for from the Monty Fool and how they are kind of breaking this down. So when you start looking at the S&P 500 funds, the index that tracks the S&P 500, these funds are weighted and they are market cap weighted, meaning that there is a much heavier concentration on these mega large companies. When you start thinking of Apple, when you think of Nvidia, when you think of Microsoft, the market mega cap companies are really the majority of the S&P 500 when you start looking at it. Now, looking at something like an equal weighted index fund. Now, this is a lot different than our traditional S&P 500, those like the VOO. With an equal weighted, it puts an equal weight onto every single company, regardless of the size of the company. So it is the exact same investment kind of strategy, but it is a different market weight that is really taken in point. If we point to the midcast of the forecast and assume an equal weight index will beat the S&P 500 over the next 5 years, they are thinking the expected return on this over a decade compared to what they're forecasting for a traditional S&P 500 fund, they are saying it is going to beat it roughly 240%. So on one side, we have really the traditional weighted by market value, and then we have the equally weighted value, and it is kind of the combination of both of those, or really the pros and cons of both of them. And again, when we start looking at the traditional S&P 500 fund, it is weighted, like we said, by market value, meaning when you look at Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, and looking at the performance and the size of those companies, that is the majority of it. When we look at the Magnificent Seven, and if you're not familiar with it, quick Google search is going to show you this accounts for 1/3 of the index. That is right. 33% of the index is into 7 stocks that are in the S&P 500. That can be very scary. And the alternative to this is the Invesco S&P 500 equal weighted ETF. So the difference between it provides exposure to those same companies, but it eliminates the concentration problem that they're really talking about with Goldman Sachs by weighting each stock evenly. So even if you have a company, that is $5 billion and you have a company that is $5 trillion, which we haven't reached that figure yet, they are going to be invested into the exact same. The exact percentage is going to be in there. Now, the use quotes because really the problem is only being seen by them and a few other analysts. I see a lot of places where JP Morgan, Bank of America, a lot of other financial institutions and a lot of other experts are saying the S&P 500 is going to have stellar years in the future and they're going to continue. Now, the Magnificent Seven are some of the most fundamentally sound companies in the world, and these are global companies. When you look at their net profit margin, it is more than double that of the other 493 companies in the S&P 500. That just gives you a scale of magnitude that we see without these. However, when it comes to earnings growth, and this is again where it kind of gets interesting, the Magnificent Seven, they're expecting it to slow down significantly next year, while growth across the other S&P 500 companies is forecasting to accelerate. Now, this is something that we've seen and that, again, a lot of analysts have been talking about. When we start looking even outside of the S&P 500, that we're going to see an incredible amount of growth in the next 3 to 5 years out of our mid-cap and our small-cap ETFs and those mid-cap and small-cap companies that are contained in there, which could really make a difference for a portfolio, where if you are holding everything just in the S&P 500, market-weighted cap might really make a big difference if those larger companies are not doing as well as we think. And of course, there could be some significant headwind with the traditional S&P 500. Now, when we start breaking it down a little bit further into this ETF, the last item is the expense ratio. Now, the Invesco S&P 500 equal weighted ETF has a middling expense, that's what they call it, of a 0.2%. When we start thinking traditional S&P, it's about a 0.02, 0.03% when it comes to those, which means you pay $2 for every $1,000 you have invested, which is significantly higher than most of those S&P 500 index funds, but it is much lower than the industry average of a 0.36 across all US index funds and mutual funds within that category. So it does fall kind of right in the middle when it does come into that kind of middle weighted. So does it make sense? Now, this equal weighted S&P 500 fund really does make sense when it comes to hedging against the concentration risk of these large companies. When you look at me personally, I have a significant amount in the Vanguard S&P 500 fund, which of course is the VOO, tracks the traditional value market weight. I have no plans to change it. I'm not going to adjust it. I think it's pretty neat to see that maybe opening up a smaller position or putting it into addition could hedge against some of the concentration. Because what could happen, and again, kind of just working on theory, if even looking at those 7 largest companies, if we see one of those companies, even 2 of those companies start to kind of level off, we're not seeing the growth, AI maybe not being as big as they really thought it was going to be, really overhyping that situation. If we start seeing these companies, their profits to their earnings ratio, their P&E ratios are super, super high. That is why they are saying the valuation is at a 100-year all-time high when it comes to here. But looking at that equal weighted index again, it seems like over the past couple decades, it has really underperformed than what we see again of the equal weighting. Since 1970, the equal weighting benchmark has beat the S&P 500 during 78 of the rolling 10 years by an annual average of 2%, according to Goldman Sachs. Now, when you start breaking it down, last decade, it did an absolute pattern reverse, meaning that when we started looking at the equal weighted benchmark, it wasn't growing and really didn't do anything in comparison to our traditional S&P funds. Now, in contrast or in context, makes the sense for investors to own positions in both the index funds and the equal weighted index funds to allocate it, really having a lot more convenience. I know it is going to be a lot of overlap, but when it comes to the weighted difference, this is also the big reason when I start looking at my 3 ETF portfolio, that is the concentration that I look at. So when I look at owning the QQQM, which is based on that NASDAQ 100, so it does look at those really big financial companies, and it is heavily vested in those financial companies. When I look at really my foundation and my core, I do invest in that VOO, that S&P 500 index fund, which again is the core, is the basis, making sure that we have the diversification within there across all of the different markets, all of those different sectors within the S&P 500. And the third one within that 3 ETF portfolio is, of course, our dividend generation. Right now, I do hold the HD. I've held it for a number of years. It has done incredibly well, not only with the dividend yield that we're getting back from it, but also with the growth factor that comes in hand with it. We're actually up, and I believe in one portfolio that we do hold it, which is my AdSense portfolio with the YouTube account that we have here. So if you like the content, guys, definitely subscribe to the channel. But overall, we're up, I believe, around 16% right now, which is kind of crazy, depending when you're getting in there. And of course, dollar cost averaging. I cannot stress it enough. Regardless of if you're in the equal weighted, if you're in the market weighted, it really makes a big difference when you're going and you're investing, not really lump sum investing, but dollar cost averaging into your investment positions. It does make a big difference buying when the market is up, buying when the market is down really can make a difference in your investment portfolio. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. When it comes to budgeting, there is one super secret tip that works every time that you want to budget, that you want to make a spending plan. That is actually doing it. If you spend time and effort in making a budget, you'll see that once you do it once or twice, it gets pretty easy. A lot of things are fixed expenses. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at and breaking down the hidden treasure chest. That is a budget itself. Now, a lot of people don't like to do a budget because it creates accountability for the individual. You can see in black and white where all of your money is going. If you like to online gamble, if you like to go out and have a lot of entertainment, if you're spending a ton of money at fast food restaurants, it is in black and white seeing your spending habit, which is the first one for our secrets in here. It is tracking your spending. Be malicious and really be meticulous about this when it comes to scrutinizing the spending that you're doing, right down to every single cent, at least for the first 2 or 3 times that you do this. Now, the reason is we want to know exactly where every single dollar is going, whether it is coffee, whether it is, different expenses, major purchases. knowing exactly where your money is going is the very first step to controlling it and being able to actually have that debt-free journey that we have back right here from our display. That is the first way. If you know I am making and generating income of X amount of dollars, I am spending it on A, B, C, D all the way through the alphabet. You know exactly where your money is going. That final category is going to be the one what you have left over. What are you going to use it for and where is it going to be? So really the time and effort is going to go into this piece, because when you start looking at your paycheck, if you get paid like I do twice a month, that's pretty basic. You know exactly what you're going to get. And if you're like me, I am salary. I know exactly what is going to come in every 2 weeks. It is clockwork at this point when it comes to my personal budget. Now for the expenses, I have, some fixed expenses, including my mortgage payment. I know what it is going to be the exact same month. I know when it comes to my Xfinity internet bill, I know with my Verizon bill, I know what it is going to be every single month. And I expect those charges to come every single month on a regular basis. Now, of course, when we start looking at your controllable expenses or really your variable expenses, those are the ones you need to focus on and see where you can mitigate or where you can cut down, because every dollar you're saving in that second bucket with your controllable expenses is one that you can use somewhere else that we'll talk about in just a minute. Now, number two, creating a realistic budget. This for a lot of people, again, comes down to the accountability piece. I don't want a budget that is so strict, you're never going to stay with it. You're going to do it, spend time and effort into it. After the first or second month, you're going to say it's an absolute waste of time. You want to make sure that you plan and you are realistic. I've seen some people that I've built budgets for that they do kind of a budgeting worksheet through the financial counseling program, and they come back and they say, okay, well, next month I'm going to spend $150 on food for the month. You have a family of four. $150 a month for food is not really realistic. Start looking through some bank statements, start looking through some credit card statements, see and break down exactly how much you do spend. And then of course, you're going to adjust accordingly, ensuring that the budget aligns with not only your lifestyle, but also with your priorities. This can include the savings and investment side. It could include the debt repayment side. You want to make sure the realistic budget. Now, another thing that I see, and this is from my personal experience, is if you start putting all of your money towards credit cards, you end up using those credit cards a lot more. A lot of justification that I see is because of the reward points that you're getting within those cards. It is not worth it. As much as I like reward points, and they can be beneficial if they are very strictly monitored and really paid off in full on a regular basis. If you've ever paid interest on a credit card, you are paying for your reward points. And trust me, it is way more expensive to pay interest on a card than it is for those reward points. Now, third one, prioritizing needs over wants. Now, this is very interesting. My son is actually going through economics, how he says it. But they go through the needs and the wants. This is in third grade, guys. This is the very basic. First, looking at your essentials. What are the things that are an absolute need? Looking at security, looking at food, looking at shelter, looking at housing, looking at transportation. Some of those are absolutely needed, and a majority of us do need them, but it makes the discretionary, or really the conversation, at what level. If I have a brand new vehicle and it costed me $25,000, great, that is a brand new vehicle. But a lot of individuals have a brand new vehicle that is $50,000, that is $70,000, that is $120,000. When it comes to, again, thinking of the needs, thinking of really the basics of transportation to get from point A to point B, regardless of the vehicle you use, is it dependable? Is it reliable? How can you cut down? This also goes into keeping up with the Joneses, lifestyle creep, a lot of things of that nature. Do you need a bigger house every time you get a promotion? Do you need a more expensive car every time you need it? Really trimming down on some of the discretionary spending, or taking a hard look on where your money is going. I just seen an individual that was paying over $2,200 a month for a car payment, yet they can't afford the lifestyle, yet they're coming for financial counseling. Definitely able to help them. But when you're looking at an absorbent amount of cost, when it not only it comes to gas, it comes to the car payment, it comes to the insurance, it comes to the maintenance, you're talking like $3,000 is going out per month for these vehicles. It is kind of crazy to think that kind of money. And then of course the individual is struggling. Now, it doesn't mean eliminating everything. This is where I feel like a lot of people get stuck with the budget. When it comes to budgeting, you want to budget in things that you want to do. What is really the reward, or what is the conscious spending? For instance, if let's say you're planning for a vacation, you're planning to go down to Disney, regardless of what it is, you can build it into the budget. If you're saying, okay, well, in 24 months, I need $2,400 to buy A, B, or C. You can budget it in $100 a month for those 24 months. You can build it into the budget. And this really makes a big difference because when you're trying to hit that goal and when you're trying to shoot for a specific goal, you will find an incredibly resourceful people are. They will find a lot of extra money in a lot of different places and really prioritizing again those needs over those wants. Now, the fourth one we look at is automation. This is the biggest place, again, that I feel like people can really simplify their lives, can really simplify their finances, setting up automatic transfers when it comes to savings accounts, when it comes to building up that emergency fund. Automating your savings is going to be incredibly convenient, incredibly easy if you do payroll deductions that are going right there. It makes savings a very regular habit for you, not really thinking about it out of sight, out of mind. Making it hassle-free, making it automated does make a really big difference. Now, when it comes to budgeting methodology, I want to talk about two of them. One is the 50-30-20 rule. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is kind of outdated. It allocates 50% of your income into needs, 30% into want, and 20% into savings. Now, what I see a lot of times is the 50-30-20 rule is about the 50-45 or the 50-50 rule when it comes to those needs and those wants, because people are living outside of their means. And that is what I'm seeing a lot of times, meaning there is nothing left for savings. There's nothing for debt repayment. There's nothing for retirement. They are at the point that paycheck to paycheck is the only way. However, they don't want to change any spending habits. They don't want the cheaper home. They don't want the cheaper vehicle. They don't want the cheaper things in life to give them the ability to repay debt or to save money. And again, this is going to make a big difference. Where do you want your priorities to fall and where do they lie? The number 6, regularly review and adjust the budget. This is something, it is not a set it and forget it tool. You're not going to build the budget on day one, spend a couple hours, get everything ironed out. That's it. That is your budget forever. As things change in life, as life does happen, there's going to be a point that you're going to have to adjust those financial goals. You're going to have to adjust your financial situation, and really making those adjustments can move the needle a lot more than you think. If, for instance, you get a promotion at work, you get a good increase, you get a salary bonus, you can put that to work for you. You can make your money generate more money or eliminate debt. Very easy to do if you stay and stick to what you're spending. For instance, right now, let's say you're making $70,000 a year, which I believe around 64, 66 is the average in America. So if you're making around $70,000 a year, all of a sudden you get a bump and you go up to 74K. Is anything going to change in your life? Because if nothing changes in your life, everything stays exactly the same status quo. You're earning $4,000 more a year, let's say with taxes, everything. So maybe it's $3,000, $3,200. Taking that $3,200 in that first year, repaying debt, putting it all towards your debt, getting rid of it. Taking again, when you come the following year, getting a little bit of a pay raise. It is about maintaining the status quo when you have an increase in income. Now, this can also be generated when it comes to building out and really having a side hustle. That is something to remember. When it comes to something like a side hustle, you have the ability to generate additional income outside of your normal budgeting, which makes a really big difference when it comes to being able to save. Now, number 7, and I know we're going to get back into the other budgeting method that I talked about, is cutting those unnecessary costs. This is eliminating and identifying subscription services, things that you no longer use, things that you're paying for that you don't have really a big utilization for. It is estimated that roughly $200+ a month is going to subscription services that people no longer use, gym memberships that people don't use, car washes. We've seen a crazy amount of subscription-based services that are coming and popping out of everywhere. Number 8, setting those clear financial goals. Now, this has to be very specific. This has to be measurable. When you know and you set down your goals, I always write them on a sticky note. I've talked about this before. I write them down as a sticky note so I know exactly what my financial goals are and how I'm going day to day, moving the needle and making small adjustments. That way we have it. It could be paying off debt, saving for vacation, building up that emergency fund, really keeping the why you're doing things financially top of mind. That way you can be a lot more successful in doing it. The number 9 makes it a little bit easier, which is using budgeting apps. There are a ton of apps out there that can manage your finances. They can make it a lot easier for you. Try a couple of them. Honestly, when it comes to, Dave Ramsey has one, Rocket Mortgage has one. There's a lot of budgeting apps out there that are completely ad-free that you don't have to pay for. And if you have to pay for the budgeting app, I really wouldn't recommend it. When you're trying to save money, when you're trying to budget, I don't want you to get another subscription just for the simple fact that it is a budgeting app that might help. You can do everything old school pen and paper, Dave Ramsey style. You can download fillable, PDF forms. If you want to do it pen and paper, it makes a difference. Trust me, I've done things on Excel. I've done things through budgeting apps. I've done things on pen and paper, writing it down. Writing it down makes a big difference. It sticks in your mind psychologically. It is a different methodology when you write it down. And number 10, building that emergency fund. The emergency fund is pivotal when you look at 3 to 6 months of expenses, because this keeps you from going back to borrowing. Guys, once you start getting budgeting, once you start the debt-free journey, once you get to the point that you don't have the credit card debt, you don't have the loan payments, you will quickly realize you have a lot more income and you're able to keep a lot of that because you're not giving it away to the financial institutions in the form of interest. And the final one that I want to go over, I said we do 2 of the budgeting, the way the budgeting that I do personally is zero-based budgeting. So I wanted to talk about that for just a minute before we're done with the video. But overall, with zero-based budgeting, it really allocates your income, then your expenses, and that final bucket, whatever's left in that final bucket is allocated into one specific place, or you could break it out a couple different places depending on how you are. For me personally, the way that I do it, my money comes in the first bucket. I pay all of my expenses, including my mortgage, in the second bucket. That third bucket, because the only thing that I have expense-wise is a mortgage, that third bucket is entirely my investment bucket. Every single dollar that goes into that bucket really goes into my accounts. I save $100 in my bank account. Everything else goes into the investment side. We're talking high yield savings accounts. We're talking, regular investments. We're looking at putting money into IRAs, putting more money into HSAs, making sure all of those are capped up. And once they're all capped, then we're putting it into a taxable brokerage account, which is where we park a lot of money. Right now, if you guys remember, and you guys checked the channel a while ago, we hit that $100,000 milestone in our portfolio. As of right now, we're at about 170. The market last year, the market this year has been absolutely on fire, and it continues to really produce. But overall, my personal preference is the zero-based budgeting. Again, I take my checking account down to a specific amount. Now, I do have my emergency fund that is fully funded. That is sitting in a high yield savings account. But every single dollar that I get, every single literally penny that I have access in there, when I'm getting interest payments, they go into an investment account. When the high yield savings pays interest, goes into the investment account. All the dividends in those investment accounts are reinvested in dividends. It really creates such a snowball of such a large magnitude that the investment accounts can just build and grow that much faster. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Are you frugal with your money? Are you tired and really getting fed up with cutting corners, running out of ideas where to find money to become financially free? Well, in today's video, we're going to be discussing 7 smart ideas to take control of your money. And I really want to give you my take on this because a lot of these do work incredibly well. Starting with our first one, investing an entire paycheck without feeling it at all. For most people, including myself, we do get 26 pay periods. We get paid every 2 weeks, meaning there are 2 months every single year that we get that bonus paycheck. A lot of people earmark it to repay bills. A lot of people use it to try to catch up. But if you use this with your 2-week pay schedule, knowing that 1 week you're going to pay the mortgage, you're going to pay a majority of the bills, the second paycheck, you're going to pay everything else. That means twice a year getting that bonus check. You could use this entire bonus check without even feeling it with your budget. When you start looking at your January, February, March, you might only get 2 paychecks, but that month that you get a third one, that extra check, put it on the calendar. This could be investing that extra paycheck, making an extra car payment, paying off some bills, putting it in a savings account to build that emergency fund. These extra paychecks will immediately help in a major way. Now, the second one we look at, declare a no spending day or a no spending week. This is something that I have personally done. And honestly, it takes the stress out of spending anything. When it comes to my no spending week, it is nothing. I will fill up on a Sunday with gas, meaning the car is all ready to go. So Monday through Friday, I am not spending anything. We are talking no takeout food, no fast food, no gas station stops, Nothing at all. The easiest way to really save money is not to spend it. If you take a day off, specifically a week, or if you take a week off, no spending means not grabbing anything. We're talking the cup of coffee, lunch with coworkers, no meals, or really plan around, making sure you're packing your own lunch because you can't go to the grocery store because you are on that no spend week. Now, this will allow you to clear out the freezer, clear out the pantry, use a lot of items that have been sitting around for a while, meaning that frugality can really set in because you'll start to see a really good reset, but you'll also see the benefit. Everything that you already have within your house is already purchased. It is already paid for. You don't want to go out and spend in excess when you already have something at your house. Now, the third one, ask for presents that save you money. This took me a while to get a hold of. So if friends and family are asking what you want for your birthday, what you want for Christmas, never feel embarrassed to think about your financial success and think about the path that you're on. What do we mean by this? One of the greatest gifts that we have ever got personally was a zoo membership. So we are a member of the Detroit Zoo, which is where we live. We are also a member of the Toledo Zoo, which was actually a gift idea that we got from our sister-in-law. So it is absolutely amazing. We love being able to visit both zoos. One has an aquarium, one has a nature center, where the other one does not. You could look at gym memberships, you could look at museums, you could look at a lot of different memberships, including gift cards. If you are struggling, guys, gift cards can be an extra expense that you can cover, whether it's going to Kroger, whether it's going to Meijer locally. You can really make that gift card really with the frugality and making sure that you do have the money when it comes to those gift cards. Now, looking at our next one, time big ticket and pricey items. This is where I feel like a lot of Americans are really running out. When you look at new refrigerators, new appliances, when you think of big screen TVs, when you think of larger purchases, I would say anything probably over $300 could be ticketed as a big ticket item. There are specific times when they are going to be a lot cheaper. When we start looking at Super Bowl parties in February, that is a really good time to buy TVs. And if you start looking at, back to school, if you look at Black Friday, if you look and if you can save money for that specific time, let's say knowing you need a TV, let's say you need $500, $800, whatever it may be for a TV, you're going to have a multitude of months to put a little bit of money away. That way, when it comes to make that big purchase, you already have it ready to go and you have the money set aside. This keeps you from borrowing money. This keeps you from going back in debt. And I don't want you to use credit cards for everything because when it comes to high interest debt or when it comes to bad debt, it is super expensive. Now, there are a lot of sites that talk about the best time to buy anything, whether it's at grocery stores, whether it's different sales cycles, whether it is specific days of the month, even looking at auto loans when it comes towards the end of the month and dealerships want to hit a quota. A lot of times they'll incentivize just a little more to save you a little bit more money when it comes to wanting to move those vehicles. Now, using completed debt payments to save more. This goes back to the debt avalanche and the debt snowball method. And if you know what these are, and if you are really focused on, when you finish off paying a debt, whether it be a credit card, an unsecured loan, a car loan, a student loan, whatever it is, that payment immediately rolls into the next payment. You are already you're really conditioned to make the payment that you already have. When you eliminate another bill, you don't want to add another bill on there. But when you eliminate a bill, you want to roll it into the next bill. You could also look at placing more money into savings accounts, starting to build up, or adding to the 401k, the IRA accounts, the HSA accounts. There's a lot of ways when you start eliminating bills. Just double check exactly what your budget or your savings plan looks like, making sure you're staying within those contribution limits. And of course, when you start eliminating those bills, you free up your income. This is one of the absolute biggest things that I realized early in my life is, you know what? If I'm not paying interest to financial institutions, I have a lot more money. The money that I'm working for, it's not about how much you make, whether it's $50,000, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million a year. It is about how much of that paycheck you keep. If you're making, again, $50,000 or you're making $200,000, if the sum at the end of the month is net zero, meaning you're spending every single penny, doesn't make a difference how much you make because you are living paycheck to paycheck regardless of your income. Now, when we start looking at going out to baseball games, going out to movies, don't assume you cannot bring your own food. There are a lot of places, even top paying, where you're buying tickets, you're buying food. They are super expensive, and I am talking crazy expensive. We went to a game this summer to get a drink, $15. To get a water, 12 bucks. Guess what? It doesn't even cost 12 bucks to get a case of water if you're buying it outside of the stadium. Snacks and drinks are just super expensive at sporting events. If you go to concert venues, if you go to anything, I mean, to even get a beer at one of these places was $12 in a can. We're talking a regular 12-ounce can was $12. You are paying $1 per ounce that is in that can, which is kind of crazy. So do your research before you go to the movies, before you go to the game. See if you can bring anything. And we actually have a local team here, which is in Jimmy John's Field, but it's very cool because it's a local team and they do allow you to bring things in there, meaning you don't have to pay their absorbent prices. You can go ahead and you can enter there. And the last one I'm going to do for you guys, buying gift cards. So if you don't know this little life hack, this little frugal hack, buying gift cards and budgeting with gift cards really limits yourself to what you have available. Me personally, there is a multitude of ways. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, I do play mobile games, and you know what? I get my gift cards on a discount. So when it is a $100 gift card, I buy them right around Black Friday. You get $15 off. That takes it down to a much cheaper price tag for that gift card. In addition to that, I get my 2% rewards from my card. If I buy them online, I can use Rakuten or a couple other sites that are going to give me more money back from Target. So I'm getting a free $15 gift card. I'm getting some rebates or some rewards for my card. And I'm also getting cash back for purchasing at the store, which is kind of crazy because you can start stacking this up. Meaning when you're buying a $100 gift card, it is not going to be $100. Now, when you start looking at some discount clubs, we're talking BJ's, Costco, Sam's Club. If you're planning on something, let's say you're going out to a movie, you can a lot of times you can buy gift cards or buy gift cards as sets, knowing that you're prepaying for the expense and knowing how much you have on that card to use, meaning that you already have it set aside. You don't have to splurge for purchases. Really, once your gift card is spent, that's it. You're not shelling out any more money because you know the cost is over there, really giving you a huge impact and a real control over your money itself. There you have it, guys. That is covering 7 smart ideas to really take control of your money. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. So you're looking to become a millionaire in 2025. Honestly, ask yourself, who isn't? But the question is, how are you going to get there going into next year? And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the advice of Ramit Sethi and breaking this down into 4 simple numbers that are super important. Now, if you know him, he is the author of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, really exploring the numbers and understanding very in-depth how to get it done going into 2025. Our first one is fixed costs. When it comes to fixed costs, he said it should be average 50 to 60% of your take-home pay. Now, if you think of the 50, 30, 20 rule or the budgeting methodology, it seems like the fixed costs are continuing to get a little bit higher, getting over that 50% mark. But the higher they get, the more difficult it's going to be to really save money, repay debt, generate wealth, anything you want to, and anything you want to invest in. Unfortunately, when you start getting north of 50% on those fixed expenses, you really get into a bind. When we start thinking of fixed costs, you're looking at your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, transportation. This includes your car payment, insurance, your gas, your groceries, debt, and your subscriptions. This is a time when you add up all your fixed costs, so you should really put another additional 15% on that number because it's not going to capture all of your fixed costs and the expenses that you have. Now, the big thing with this is you can pinpoint exactly where you're overspending, and you can pinpoint those stress points that you can eliminate or free up some of the budget, which makes a big difference. If you're running north of 50% towards 55, 60%, you are definitely going to have to cut something out of the budget. Might mean looking at a cheaper rent, refinancing a mortgage, could be looking at a cheaper auto, getting a better rate. There's a lot of different ways, shopping for insurance. Really, groceries are a big place. You can definitely eliminate some. Also, when it comes to debt, when it comes to bad debt, credit card debt, it is absorbent and it is super expensive to have bad debt out there. And of course, subscription services. How many of those haven't you used and how many of those can you cut out in their entirety? Looking at our second one, long-term investing. So when we think of long-term investing, we are talking 5+ years. I don't want to see anyone investing for 6 months, 8 months, for 2 weeks. I see a lot of things, especially when it comes to investing. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, that people are in it, they'll lose a little bit of money, they'll pull everything out. That is not the way to look at investing. When you start looking at short-term gains, when you start looking at anything, we are talking real wealth is created and accumulated through long-term investing. Now, Ramit here says putting at least 10% of your take-home pay away into an investment vehicle. This could be your 401k plans. This could be your IRAs, anything, even if it is post-tax, if it's pre-tax, making sure 10% is your minimum that you're trying to get to. Now, the ultimate goal when it comes to long-term investing is looking at least 15% long-term. When you start getting those fixed expenses under control, when you start getting a little bit of that debt paid down, it is going to free up money that you can put. So he advises putting 5% of the salary into a 401k and 5% into a Roth, and then upping it 1% every year on your annual raise, which I definitely agree to. This is exactly how I did get to that 15% in my 401k. Is every single year I started out at 10, then I moved to 11, I got a 3% raise, 1% more in there, so I only got a 2% raise. But guess what? The compounding effect that I've seen in my portfolio is absolutely game changing. Making sure as you don't, and as your income increases, that you're not taking on more fixed costs. You're not buying a more expensive home. You're not buying a more expensive car. You want to make sure that the investment part is covered in the second step. Third one we look at is a savings goal, and making sure you have a goal. Majority of millionaires, short of hitting the lotto, do not get rich and do not get famous overnight. It takes time, it takes savings. Even thinking of 401k contributions, a majority of 401k millionaires are first generation. Over 90% of first generation millionaires are from regularly investing. And when we start thinking of our savings goal, 5 to 10% of your take home pay, this is of course money that is going to be used in the short term. When we talk about that long-term investing, we are looking at 5+ years. With the savings goal, this is of course going to include that emergency fund that's going to be in there, but we are looking money that is going to be shorter term. We're talking 1 to 5. So it is going to be the shorter terminology, or the shorter really runway with the money that is in there. Now, this is going to be used for down payment for a house, engagement ring, going on trips, weddings, vacations. Everything is going to be built into the savings category. And it's also going to contain that emergency fund within there. And if anything should happen, if there's a death in the family, if there's a job loss, if there's any unexpected expenses that come out of nowhere, you're going to be able to cover everything for an extended amount of time. You want to make sure, this is the point, if anything should happen, that you're starting to cut out a lot of those fixed costs and those variable expenses in the short term, as long as you can get everything under control. Now, of course, the 3 to 6 months is a general guidance when it comes to that emergency fund, really depending on the kind of life you have and the kind of job you have. I always kind of lean to this. If you're in a job that is very stable, that you're in, a good market, which I know nowadays anything could change, but if you have a good job in a good market that is pretty low risk, keeping 3 to 4 months is good. If you're in anything that is sales orientated, I recommend 6 months of savings in there. If you're in a job that could be hazardous, could be a high risk, could be something where something detrimental could happen, lean more towards that 5 or 6 month of that emergency fund. It makes a big difference. If you don't have enough money to put into savings, this might have to really look at your spending habits and really cut back on some of those expenses that we talked about earlier. And the last one in here, and this is probably one of the biggest ones that people really do overlook when it comes to building wealth, when it comes to really saving, and when it comes to spending. He talks about guilt-free spending. Now, this is something that is very clear when it comes to the numbers. Money is meant to be spent, not hoarded. Now, this means you are going to enjoy your life. This is the reason why when it comes to retirement, what kind of retirement makes a big difference between having 1 million or needing $5 million. It is going to be super important to know that you can spend some of your money without the anxiety of really going bankrupt and you're not losing anything. The point of money is not to simply save it, but getting to the point of generating additional money so you can live your rich life. And that is kind of what he refers to. Should you save money? Yes. Should you invest it? Yes. Should you spend it? Absolutely. After you pay your bills, after you invest, after you're saving money, then you have a bucket of money essentially that are things you want to live life, guys. It's not meant to work 40 hours a week, 50, 60 hours a week for 45 years to enjoy retirement. Once you finally get to retirement, you don't want to spend any money because there is a fear that comes along with it, meaning that you're going to run out of money during retirement. You're not going to have enough money. When you get to the point of being healthy and kind of set, once you're filling all of those buckets, take time to enjoy life, enjoy it with your family, enjoy it with your friends, do whatever you need to. So good guideline here, 20 to 30% of the take-home pay is for guilt-free spending. That is a lot of money when you think about restaurants, bars, taxis, vacation, clothing, whatever you want to. It is about the numbers and about living your life. So when you look at fixed costs, 50 to 60%, we're putting that 10% in investments, we're putting 5 to 10% into the savings account. So even looking there, when you're building it out, you'll have a pretty healthy amount of that guilt-free spending that he talks about to really make a big difference. Now, overall, some of the advice that he provides, I think, is really on par. I've seen his show on Netflix for Ramit Sethi, and it's really interesting to see. Some of it does go to kind of the extreme with some of it, but I think, honestly, when you look at Dave Ramsey, when you look at him, when you look at a lot of the financial gurus, it really does make a big difference when you sit down and really looking through it. It's very similar when it comes to things you need to do. Fixed costs, that means, making sure you know exactly what your expenses are, knowing exactly what your budget looks like, making sure you're investing, making sure your savings, you have that emergency fund, and then, of course, spending time and enjoying your life with the money that you earn. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Do you consider yourself to be frugal? One key approach to being frugal or frugality is the ability to save more money, reduce your debt, and achieve those long-term goals that we're looking for to set you financially free. In today's video, we're going to be looking at 10 frugal habits that Dave Ramsey recommends, starting with our first one, creating and sticking to a budget. Now, for me, I am a financial counselor. This is something I love to do. Having a budget and living within your means is something that I feel like a lot of people have completely put out to the wind. They don't do it at all. But when it comes to a budget, knowing how much money you're earning, how much you're spending, and exactly what you have left over is the game changer. It is the foundation to controlling your expenses and knowing exactly what you want to save, how you can save. By tracking income and expenses, you can identify any areas that you need to cut or that you're spending over on. Makes a big difference when it comes to frugality. Now, the second one is that emergency fund. Now, when we think of baby steps and emergency funds, this is something you absolutely have to do. This keeps you from borrowing. This keeps you from the credit card debt, from the unsecured borrowing. When something happens, you have money set aside already. Being in the frugal mindset, because you're living within your means, you have a certain portion of your income that is dedicated to the savings. Building that emergency fund is imperative. And of course, paying off the debt. Now, it seems like these might be Dave Ramsey's the 7 baby steps, but overall, eliminating debt gets you the ability to keep your paycheck. That's it. When you talk about earning money and not wanting to work as much, earning more money, the money that you earn doesn't matter if it's $10,000, $50,000, $100,000. It doesn't matter how much money you earn. It is how much money you actually keep in your pocket. If I'm earning $100,000 a year and I'm spending $120,000, there's going to be a $20,000 deficit that is going to be created every single year, regardless of how much you do. This is where the debt snowball and the debt avalanche methods come in, paying that off and eliminating that debt. And you can actually keep your money, guys. It's a crazy concept, I know, saving for things to buy it versus buying it, instant gratification today, and then spending the next 5 years paying it off. It is a game changer. And that goes into number 4, avoiding debt at all costs. When it comes to cards are very bad because of the interest rates. Even right now, we took out a credit card or I think some sort of loan. We bought new furniture. It is through Synchrony Bank, 38.99%. You talk about a way to really kill your budget and absolutely decimate any savings plan you have. Try paying 39%. Now, granted, they gave us 21 months at 0%. At the end of 21 months, it goes back to that 38.99%. And the interest will accumulate from day one of the purchase, meaning 21 months of interest at 38.99%. That is going to be a very hefty payment if I do not spend it or really pay it off within that 21 months. Now, of course, to get into the financing, they gave us 25% discount on the furniture we bought because we financed it versus just paying cash. Now, I have the cash to pay for it. We're just going to pay it off when the first bill comes. But overall, we saved 25% by not going into debt or using the debt cycle to get the furniture, knowing there could be associated fees with it, there could be expenses, and they're really relying on you not paying it off. Number 5, we look at the envelope cash system management. Now, this is an old school way to manage everything. Right now, a lot of people use virtual wallets. They use multiple bank accounts. There's a lot of different ways, but when you spend cash, psychologically, it feels different. When you have those $20 bills, when you have those $100 bills,
it feels different putting money into a specific category. So let's say you budget, $200 a week for food. Putting $200 in an envelope can really make a difference, because when that $200 is spent, that's it. It's done. You don't have any more to spend. Might mean putting a few things back at the grocery store, but when you start looking at everything in your life, you could do this. If you're doing it for entertainment, if you're doing it for utilities, knowing exactly how much you're spending and really building that budget is a game changer for the rest of your life. Number 6, we look at buying used instead of new. Now, there are a ton of things when you think of the frugal mindset that you can get the exact identical item, and there's a lot of ways to get it very heavily discounted, which is kind of crazy. When you look at big ticket items, looking at cars, looking at furniture, I do not and really will never buy brand new cars. The reason being depreciation. When you drive a car off the lot, even in this day and age with inflated prices, they say it's losing 10, 15, some of them even 20% to depreciation on day one when it comes off the lot, which is kind of crazy. When you think of getting a car a year or two older, I've seen the difference of, let's say, a $50,000 car. If you're buying the variation or the one that is already 2 years old, seen one that had about 15,000 miles, guess what? $20,000 cheaper. That is eating the depreciation, guys. I will absolutely buy that $35,000 car versus that $50,000 car, because of course it is a lot cheaper to get and a lot easier with the monthly payment. And for me personally, I just pay for vehicles outright. I don't want to finance it. I don't want to finance $35,000, end up paying $42,000 over the next 5 years. That is essentially $7,000 of the financing cost that I could keep in my pocket, that I don't have to worry about at all. That money that you could spend on vacations, you could spend on trips. I could spend $7,000 more investing, which is something I absolutely love to do. You could also go to thrift stores, garage sales. I know Facebook Marketplace is a place we've gotten actually quite a bit of our furniture in super cheap, guys. When people are getting rid of $1,000 bedroom sets and we pay $150 for them, yeah, we got to move them. But you know what? I am saving 85% off the retail price, which is kind of crazy. Number 7, cooking at home instead of eating out or meal prepping. This is something that me and my wife do every single week. We make all of our lunches for the entire week. We get everything set. We have kind of a schedule. We know what we're going to be making, what is going to be required to make those items. It is really, really important when it comes to dining out, even thinking of McDonald's, fast food, even local places. It is super, super costly. It is a very high price tag. Even thinking McDonald's family 4, you're talking probably $45, $50, which is kind of crazy. I know there's some ways, depending on what you have, to get a little bit cheaper. When you start looking at home cooked meals, not only do you get and save some money, but it is also a very healthy substitute. You know what is going in the food, you know what you're putting in there. Makes a really big difference, especially if you have a larger family, because it can get very expensive. Now, when it comes to expenses, planning for big purchases, this is something that we do. This is budgeting for big ticket items. For instance, I have not had a car payment for 8 years. That's right. It might be kind of crazy to a lot of people, but it has been 8 years since I had a car payment. I know there's going to be a point in the future as my car continues to age. I am going to need a new car. It's coming. I know it's coming. My car has about 50,000 miles, runs really well. I run my cars until they are completely done. But like I said, 8 years of no car payment. Same with my wife, 8 years that we have had no car payment. Now, within that time frame, we have been saving hundreds of dollars a month because we don't have those car payments, in anticipation of knowing those car payments are coming. So if we're going to buy, let's say, another $35,000 car, we have the ability to just buy the car outright because we have been saving those monthly car payments in a high yield savings account and really putting the money aside. When it comes to cars, when it comes to appliances, when it comes to vacations, I see a lot of people that are borrowing money and going into debt. When it comes to vacations, when it comes to weddings, when it comes to a lot of things that if people only prepared for and really set aside money for those big purchases, it would be a game changer for their entire life. So instead of borrowing $25,000 for a wedding, ending up spending and really paying back $35,000, not only starting the marriage in debt, but paying back an additional $10,000 of interest. It is kind of crazy how much people do put into debt and how much people do put into financing. Number 9, limiting your impulse purchases. Now, this is something that the delayed gratification has to come in. And honestly, challenge yourself, test yourself, see if you can do it. If there is something that you want to buy, give it a 24-hour cooldown. If you still want to buy it after 24 hours and it fits in the budget, absolutely go ahead and buy it. Another thing we have done is a no spending week. This, of course, does take a little bit of prep, takes a little bit of time, making sure that your cars have fuel, everything of that nature. But that means not going to the gas station, not going to the store, not going out to eat. No spending weeks mean nothing at all that you're going to be spending during that week. And it does make a big difference. Honestly, there's something that I might see on a Wednesday of a no spend week. I don't buy it. And essentially within the next couple of days, I forget all about it because it is that no spend week and I'm not buying anything. It really assesses if you truly need it. That is the big question mark where I feel a lot of people fail. Do we need more stuff or are we happy with what we have? Can we use what we have? Are there things that we can repurpose? Are there ways that we can get things cheaper? There are so many different ways that you can get it cheaper and you can save an incredible amount of money. And the final one we're leaving you with, living below your means. This is really the big Dave Ramsey philosophy ever since I followed him for years and years and years. At this point, when you think of frugal habits, when you think of making really life a priority over stuff, really looking at the needs versus the wants, it is a game changer for the rest of your life, guys. When you start really looking at the lifestyle you want, the lifestyle inflation, trying to keep up with the Joneses, it is not worth it at all. In the earlier in life, really, that you learn that, it is going to be literally better for the rest of your life. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.
When you look at your bank account, a lot of people wonder exactly where all the money went. Most of the time, it's not those really big purchases that you had accountability for, but the truth is, it is the little items that are kind of nickel and diming you down to that paycheck to paycheck mentality. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at some of those daily expenses that you can eliminate if you just really pay attention to them. And I also want to go ahead and say a lot of these I do, and a lot of these I have really cut out. With the first one, looking at bottled water. When you think of the daily expense of bottled water, if you're spending, and on average it is $2 a day, that is $60 a month if you're buying a bottle of water every single day. And if you're buying some other water, it could be $3, $5, even $7 per bottle of water. By the end of the year, you could be spending $1,000 a year just on bottle of water, which is kind of crazy. That's the reason why we've seen a huge rise with these custom Stanley mugs and everything else that people are using versus getting those bottle of water. Because again, when it comes to nickel and diming you and a couple dollars here or there, even with the impulse purchases at checkout, it can really be super expensive. Then we get into prepackaged snacks. Snacking is great. The price and the convenience of the grab and go. When you think of Kroger, when I think of Walmart, when I think of, Myers, all the places around here, they have entire aisles dedicated now to your prepackaged snacks, to the grab and go, and they are a lot smaller quantity and they are a lot more expensive. $3 to $5 every single day on snacking is almost $90 to $100 a month, which is incredible when it comes to the cost. You're talking well over $1,000 alone per year with this. If you're buying things in a larger quantity, if you're buying it at bulk, a lot of times you can literally save, 2x, 3x, 5x the price of buying those little grab and go. And if you notice that the snack size has now become the fun size, and the fun size is even tinier than the snack size is. And of course, the cost of it just continues to increase, especially when it comes to chocolate. It is expensive. Now, the third one we look at is eating out for lunch. For me personally, this is one that I cut out in its entirety. So we do meal prep every Sunday. We prep everything for the entire week. Eating out for lunch roughly is about $10 to $15 a day per person. That's right. You're talking $50 a week just to eat lunch if you're eating out every day. And also depending on where you're going, $10 to $15 might not even cut it. So you're talking $2,500 to $3,000 a year. When you think of the ability to cut that down, even cutting it down, let's say from 3,000, maybe down to 1,000 for really an average, you could save over $2,000 just from packing your own lunch, not only making it a cheaper variety or version, but also for a majority of us, it will be a much healthier version as well. Then we start into the shopping aspect. When you think of brand name groceries, buying a brand name sometimes can be very reassuring, but when you look at the cost versus some of the store brands, when you look at a majority of your Walmarts, your Krogers, even thinking of BJ's, Costco, Sam's Club, all of them have their own brand name or their own store brand, which of course is infinitely cheaper than what we see from the brand name groceries this can have a huge impact on your bill. When you talk about something that can save, thousands of dollars a year, it is really choosing even like a name brand paper towel, really getting the store brand versus the name brand on something like paper towel, toilet paper, a lot of those, as long as the quality of it is comparable, you can save an incredible amount of money going through there. And then we get into my favorite, which I had to wrangle in the biggest, probably out of any one of these, which is in-app purchases. Now, I am a gamer. I do play AFK Arena. I play Guild of Guardians. In-app purchases, when you think of a small amount, and this also goes for gambling, when you think of getting those $1.99 packs, those $2.99 purchases, even putting that $4.99 in some of the MGM Grand Casino online apps, dollar for dollar, there is nothing that you're going to get really out of this. Even when you leave a game, a lot of times when you leave, your casino addiction can add up to hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands of dollars a year that you could be spending it on something else. You could be debt repayment. You could really be doing something for yourself, whether it's time off, vacation, saving up, investing. There are so many things you can do versus getting in-app purchases. And again, that is something that I absolutely had to wrangle in. Same with expensive hair treatments. When you start going to the salon, some people are spending $100 to $200 per month, depending where they're going, which is kind of crazy, the amount of money that you can spend getting haircuts. Even thinking here, haircuts used to be, and I go to Lady Jane's, which is a local place here, it was $12, then it was $15, now it was $18, now it is $25. So in the last 4 years, that's right, since COVID, their haircuts have over doubled in price in 4 years. They, really equate it to inflation. And also with that price tag, if you're getting your haircut every 2 or 3 weeks at a $25 price tag, then you throw in a tip on that $25 price tag, you're spending roughly, and again, I go every 2 weeks, you're talking like $50 to $60 that we're getting just out of haircuts every single month, which is, of course, a big bill when you're spending $720 a year just on haircuts yourself. Then we get into lottery. Now, when it comes to financial counseling, when it comes to education, the financial counseling aspect, lottery tickets and online gambling are really a pandemic. I see people that are literally spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a monthly basis on lottery tickets, on online gambling. Again, we think of, BetMGM, you think of a lot of different ways. When you start looking at the big picture of lottery, you can be very disciplined with it. You can set $5 or $10 aside every single week. You can put it in there. Most people are putting an exorbitant amount of money, and we are seeing them really go into so much debt with their credit cards. I have seen home foreclosures. I have seen car repossessions. I've seen a crazy amount of things when it comes to lottery and when it comes to gambling that people, it's kind of crazy that they're putting all of this money into it. And of course, the probability is you're not going to win anything. So they are dumping a ton of money into it with the hopes of hitting it big. And unfortunately, I haven't met any of them yet that have hit it big. Now, when we start looking at the financial institutions, the next one that comes up for common purchases are bank fees. When you think of ATM fees, when you look at monthly fees, maintenance fees, overdraft fees, even $5 a month can make a big difference when it comes to how much you're putting out. You're talking that is $60 a year. That is super low on the low end. When you think of a common overdraft courtesy pay fee, something of that nature, it is roughly $37 per occurrence is the average when it comes to a financial institution. Definitely look at your credit unions versus your banks, not only getting a higher yield on your return, meaning the money you have in your savings account, the money in the checking account, but also having much lower overdraft fees. And of course, you can eliminate a lot of the ATM fees with the shared network as well. Now, this is another one that I refuse to do, that I've seen so many people doing, that I see on a regular basis, which is car wash memberships. Frequent car washes can be super expensive. And again, thinking of the auto wash, we had a $3 wash, went out of business. We had a $5 wash, went out of business. Now the cheapest auto wash that we have, and there's actually one, a Jack's Car Wash, right down the road from my work. The cheapest wash there is $12 per trip. So if you think about that, if you're doing it multiple times a week, I'd love to have a clean car. But when you're looking at $50, $60, $70, $100 a month, that some people are spending on the car. Now, in addition to those, the memberships, we start looking at the memberships. Memberships are starting at that exact same auto wash at $32. So think about that for a minute. If you're doing $32 a month for an auto wash, you better make sure that you're bringing your car there every single day to get your money worth. But even if you're doing 3 washes during the month, you'll actually be saving money by getting that membership. And I do not like memberships, guys. You could wash your car at home. I know there's going to be a price to get the materials and the water bill, but overall, it seems like it's a lot more affordable than getting those frequent auto washes. Me personally, what I do for auto washes is anytime that I get a lot of salt, I live up here in Michigan, just north of Detroit. We have a lot of salt on our roads and it can be absolutely detrimental to your vehicle. I look at getting an auto wash when the roads are heavily salted through the winter because that is going to increase the longevity of my car because we're not going to see it rust out. Now, the other big one that we see is impulse buys at checkout. It is estimated that Americans are spending $2,500 a year at the impulse buy at checkout. When you look at a checkout, again, thinking of my Kroger, it's got literally everything you could ever want. It's got gum there, it's got candy, it's got chips. They have all of the coolers for the takeout, the impulse. And when you start looking at all of that stuff, even stacking gift cards in there, there is an absorbent amount of stuff that they are stocking and really putting in those cash register aisles, making sure that they are taking the most of those impulse purchases. And of course, when you're buying one single item at checkout, let's say it's a bag of chips, let's say it's a pop, the price of it is much, much higher than if you just went back and bought the entire thing, which makes a really big difference again when it comes to the cost and what you're spending. And this is another pet peeve of mine is decorations. Seasonal decorations, as much as I like them, they are good if you set money aside for them, but there's a lot of people that are spending, I mean, look at Halloween decorations. We're now getting into the holiday season, the Christmas season. We are seeing thousands of dollars put into Halloween decorations. I have seen some of the Halloween displays that are running, $500 for one animated figure that they had at Home Depot. I've seen them all over the neighborhood. Then I start adding it up and I'm like, okay, well, that's thousands. And then I start going through the houses. I'm like, okay, well, that's tens of thousands of dollars that I see in decorations. Now, as much as I like them, it is an absorbent amount of cost and things that really don't affect it very much, but does come at a big price tag. So, all right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. The stock market is headed for an absolute banner year. When we start looking at the benchmark, the S&P 500, it has advanced 27% in 2024 alone, putting it on pace for the best ever performance in the 21st century, which is kind of crazy. And the S&P 500 has really outpaced 4 dozen record new highs this year, including December 2nd. It was a fresh new high with the artificial intelligence boost, with the interest rates that are getting cut. But now the investors are really wondering, and this is a question I'm getting a lot, should you buy the S&P 500 since we're seeing all of these record days and all of these record highs? A lot of people are saying no, and I want to break down this, including what Warren Buffett says about a $150 billion warning to investors as we see this S&P 500 go ahead and progress. Now, when we think of Warren Buffett, he is one of the foremost and really one of the most prominent investors in the world. Under the leadership, Berkshire Hathaway in its Class A has increased 20% every year since the mid-60s. You want to talk about some crazy growth. If you just invested in Berkshire Hathaway in the 60s, it has had a 20% annual growth rate, which of course is almost doubling what the S&P 500 is doing, but the S&P 500 is still doing crazy amounts. Now, when we start looking at some of the biggest contributions, he has a lot of Apple, he holds Coca-Cola, American Express, that he bought for pennies on the dollar when the companies were relatively new. But now thinking of Berkshire Hathaway and their $300 billion stock portfolio and recent capital allocation decisions to really keep some of the money on the sideline and been a net seller in the last 7 quarters. So think about that. When you have one of the most prominent billionaires in the world that has been selling a lot more than they're buying in the last 7 quarters. So we're looking at almost 2 years of them really trimming the hedges and selling over $150 billion, which of course is half of that portfolio. Logical conclusion, Buffett is struggling to find reasonable price stocks that are marking and really running this market up. When we start thinking of the S&P itself, it trades at 22 times the forward earning, a premium to the 5-year average of 19.6. So the valuation of these companies are increasing, and that as a result is driving this S&P 500 to new highs, and we are going to see higher forward P/E ratios, which of course can really correlate to poor performance in the future. And there's a multitude of places that are just getting 3%, that aren't even getting 3%. And a lot of it is being driven by those AI stocks and those larger, really mega sized companies. So when you put this in context,
When Warren Buffett drops 150 billion or sells $150 billion of stocks, it's kind of crazy because of the capital allocation that he has and what he can pull. When you look at Berkshire, it's worth $1 trillion plus. Buying into small companies would hardly move the needle for any of those. But when you look at wanting to avoid tech stocks, he doesn't understand some of the technology and really what is coming with AI. And he's chosen to really looking at how overvalued some of these companies really see. A lot of it doesn't make sense when it comes to tech, when it comes to AI, when it comes to what these companies are putting behind artificial intelligence. If we see any drawback, if we see any pullback, it could be very, very detrimental to something like the S&P 500 going into 2025. Now, in addition, there was an article that was written when we looked at correlations between the S&P 500 and 2 consecutive years of double-digit growth. The third year historically, going back to 1926, has been a very big pullback year. They're talking 10, 15, 20% of a pullback in the S&P 500. Now, of course, if you're like me, that is going to give me the ability to buy a lot of the S&P 500. We did this back in 2022 when we started seeing the market decline. As it continued to decline, we continued to purchase it. It got to the point where the market started rebounding in 23 and 24. All of a sudden, the portfolio is up 100% because I did dollar cost averaging when it was going down. Now, you might ask yourself, what is DCA or dollar cost averaging? When it comes to dollar cost averaging, I invest if the market is up, I invest if the market is down. I don't really worry about where the market is and what I'm investing in specifically because I'm worried about a dollar amount. I put X amount of dollars into the market every 2 weeks. Like I said, regardless of the, where we're putting it, it makes a big difference with the consistent, really investments that are going in there. It makes sense, dollar cost averaging. I have my 3 ETF portfolio that we've talked about before. I put money in there and put it on a regular basis, which it's just automatically invested into everything. Now, when we start looking again, his latest letter to the shareholders from Buffett remains a handful of companies that are truly moving the needle at Berkshire Hathaway, and it's essential to pick those over other ones. And of course, when it comes to Berkshire Hathaway, a majority of the stocks are in the United States. He does talk about international stocks. Throwing them into the analysis outside of the US, there are essentially no candidates that are meaningful options for capital deployment at Berkshire Hathaway. Think about that. So when we have the United States economy in general, we're roughly 50% of the global economy. He is saying there's essentially no candidates out there in the international market. Now, me personally, I am one that only invests in ETFs, and I do not invest in international markets. Reason being, some of them I don't understand. I don't know the companies. But the big fact is, when you start looking at these big companies, when you look at Apple, when you look at Google, Meta, Nvidia, all of these very large companies are global companies. There is nothing they're doing, that is just in one specific area, one specific company. They are global companies, meaning even when you start looking at McDonald's, when you look at Starbucks, when you look at these companies, they are not just looking at, investing in the international stock market. Investing here, you are investing internationally because those large companies are international companies. So the big picture here, many stocks are historically expensive. So compelling investments options have become increasingly difficult to find. Now, this was true of Tesla many years ago. Shire being a net seller of stocks in the last 7 quarters means that he is not seeing value in those companies, but retail investors have really deployed trillions of dollars into companies like Berkshire Hathaway. In addition, when we start seeing Bitcoin, a lot of people don't want to invest in cryptocurrency, but now we have ETFs. Now we have a lot of different options. So when you start thinking bigger picture in the investment strategy, a lot of places, including BlackRock, are saying Bitcoin and cryptocurrency should be in an investment portfolio, even if it's at a very small amount. We're talking 1, 2, 3%. And I believe specifically they talk about 2% of your portfolio being in cryptocurrency like a Bitcoin ETF and being able to have a little bit of exposure into that market. Now, overall, I know Bitcoin was on the trend and looking at $100,000 that it's going to be valued at, which is kind of crazy because a couple years ago it was 18. We've seen it at 32, and now it is tripled from where that was. So I wish I did put a lot more in there. But again, when it comes to these ETFs, when it comes to Bitcoin itself, I choose not to buy the ETF, but I buy Bitcoin itself.
And I do the exact same thing through dollar cost averaging. Every single week, I put $100 into Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's up, I put $100 in. If Bitcoin is down, I do the exact same. I'm putting $100 into Bitcoin, and that is where it is staying, and that is where I'm keeping it for the long term. So when you think about that, 52 weeks in the year, we're putting $5,200 into Bitcoin every single year. Not going to be groundbreaking, not going to be absolutely crazy, but overall, having some exposure into that sector over a multitude of years is, of course, going to grow. So should you invest in the S&P 500? Really, that comes down to the time in the market versus timing the market. If you start doing dollar cost averaging, and you can really have two options. One, you can do lump sum investing, just pushing all your money right into the S&P 500 right now at record highs, or you can dollar cost average, which I'm doing even with my investment strategy, $250 a week into the S&P 500, as well as the rest of the 3 ETF portfolios, meaning that I am dollar cost averaging into the position that I have. And again, if it starts coming down, if it continues to decline, I am going to continue to buy it, which is going to be super effective, super cost efficient. And if it does go up, you know what? I'm buying it all the way up as well. Dollar cost averaging is the way to go. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.